In our reading this morning, Rebecca Parker calls us to keep faith with beauty. She reminds us through James Baldwin's essay that no matter the hardships, the oppression, the challenges that we face in our lives, that even still, there is joy and beauty in the children, in the light of this day, and the cool, refreshing. Man, what a difference a week makes, this weather. That there is still beauty in the midst of all of the hardship or loss that we face. She encourages us to keep faith with beauty. She describes, if we were to continue with her essay, two of the spiritual practices that she maintains to help her keep faith with beauty. Just two, Rebecca? That's all you have? I wish I had two spiritual practices that I maintained with intention and regularity every week of my life. I don't even make time for one right now. Sure, I do a variety of things that you could call spiritual practice, randomly here or there, but I don't do the one thing that I really feel called to do each morning when I wake up, which is to write. I tell myself, I'm too busy for that. It's going to take too long, and there's no time for it this morning, Erin. You've got to do your physical therapy, and then your email inbox is just overloaded. All of these faces who are looking at you now, many of them have sent you emails. They're waiting to hear from you. And besides, how could I even sit down to my kitchen table to do this? I've got piles of books and bills and paint samples. Because, we just bought this 110-year-old house, and it needs to be painted inside and out. I wish Moira lived in my house. I'm moved to tears, Moira. I wish that singing like that could break through into my life. Can you imagine what that would be like in the morning? The alarm goes off and you're like, oh, I have all this stuff to do. And you roll over to stop the alarm and you hear, It makes me think of the little red buzzers I think they have at Office Depot that say, that was easy. Like, I wish I could just hit a button and Moira would sing, and I'd be like, oh yeah, what really matters right now? Hearing straight up beauty makes it really easy to say, oh, it's worthwhile to take time to keep faith with beauty, to make space for that in my life. Like the choir just sang, one whose inner beauty shines out like a light. I don't know what I'm shining out lately, but I don't know that it's light. And there are many ways that people call themselves back to this place, this creating an opening for remembering what matters. Some people may do it through meditation. Some people may do writing. They may do it while they're walking their dog. They may reflect, read poetry, or any other thing that helps open the heart and lift the gaze. For some people, I've heard them say, oh, I don't have to have a spiritual practice because, my cat comes in every morning and just starts and like pawing at my face to wake me up. And that opens my heart in a way that I start out the day centered with this giggle and joy. And I think, really? I guess I'm going to believe you because you're saying it, but I am not one of those people. If I get woken up by the neighbor's dog or something, and I'll go, oh, signs of life. I just don't. Maybe if you're like me, you don't wake up to the day open to life, expecting to love, and prepared to serve unless you put some work and conscious effort into it. That's why they call it a practice, because rather than just living by default, it's something we have to practice, to remember to do. We make a decision to practice living engaged. And so what makes that spiritual? A colleague of mine says that spirituality is when we live the ordinary life extraordinarily well. It doesn't have to be supernatural to be spiritual. It can be the seeking to live with meaning and purpose. And when we practice opening our hearts and minds to life, we live our lives with meaning and purpose. Thich Nhat Hanh describes the need for spiritual practice as follows. He says, living in modern society, one feels that he cannot easily retain integrity, wholeness. One is robbed permanently of humanness, the capacity of being oneself. When I drive through Paris, the noises and the traffic jams make me nervous. Once I've gone through Paris, I become less than myself. And there are so many things like that in modern life that make you lose yourself. He said that 40 years ago, people. He said that in 1975, before Facebook and FaceTime and Instagram and online news and YouTube and all the ways that we can stay constantly connected and therefore disconnected. He continued, we need communities of resistance. Resistance meaning opposition to being invaded, occupied, assaulted, and destroyed by the system. The purpose of resistance is to seek the healing of yourself in order to be able to see clearly. This may sound as though it falls short of a positive act of resistance. Nevertheless, it is very basic. I think communities of resistance should be places where people can return to themselves more easily, where the conditions are such that they can heal themselves and recover their wholeness. I think what I hear in the reading at Thich Nhat Hanh, what they're saying about spiritual practice are basically the same thing. They're pointing out to the need for us to step outside of the pace and the pressures of our daily living. They both point to the need to experience the beauty of this world and the world within if we're going to rediscover reality. Not what we've been sold or taught, but really this reality. If we're to live by a deeper truth than the market's concerns, we need time and space to consider reality and align ourselves with what we believe matters. This is what a religious community does. This is what I am telling myself a social justice minister does. And I'm falling short. But I don't want to. I want to be a part of a community of resistance. Do you? Is that part of why you come here? Yeah, that's why I'm called to this work. Well, if that's true, then we have some time to carve out and some work to do. I think we're pretty good at resisting injustice in this church. We have so many different groups of people who are committed to specific issues of ways of serving individual needs and changing systems in Des Moines that don't work for people. But we have room to grow in that work and how we invite more people to get involved. But we're good at resisting injustice. We don't just talk about it, we do things. And we're also good at resisting the busyness of life in this church. Some of us are in Soul Matters groups. You may sing in the choir or make meals on Wednesday nights with one another or teach downstairs in our programs, meet with people through our pastoral care and our caring circle work. But we could grow in our ability to slow down with one another, and especially those of us who I work with most who are involved in our social justice work. We could grow in our ability to slow down, to make time, to build relationships with one another, to do more than just have meetings. Can I get a hallelujah? We have to do more than have meetings. I'm going to go insane if my social justice ministry is about bullet points and agenda items. That is not what a ministry is. And we are in a church. We are not just doing social justice through civic groups. We are doing it in a church. We need to do more than have meetings. We need to connect with each other about what we're doing and why. We need to share experiences of reconnecting fundamentally with each other with beauty. Not just saying, I did this weekend and it was great, but actually making time together that we can rest in the beauty of this world so that we can nurture and sustain our call to justice. If we're going to strengthen our social justice ministry here in this church, which I know we are, then we've got to do more than envision what our infrastructures and committees are going to look like in the new Social Justice Council. We also need to think about how we're going to nurture and strengthen our spiritual call to the very work we care so much about. And right now, I'm not sure how to do this. I have so many meetings on my calendar with folks involved in social justice and soul matters, and we tend to create little to no time in our justice meetings within them to tend to our spiritual lives or reconnect with the source of our call to the work in the first place. And I am guilty of this. I came into this church hearing that we've done so much talking about social justice, we don't want to talk about it anymore. We just want to do things so that we don't just feel like people who come into an isolated building. We want to put our faith into action. So I've been trying to help you do that. But that's not sustainable if we don't also build into our time together chances for us to reflect on how are we embodying this work in the first place. We have to be about more than meetings, more than activity. We have to also be about growth. Because we're not just talking about justice as something that is out there. I really appreciate Rebecca Parker's writings. She has another book, Ashes, Proverbs of Ashes, in which she describes her own experience with rape, with childhood sexual abuse, with the violence that has gone deep into the core of her heart. And if you heard in the reading, she described a question. She said, how are we to resist and push back against the violence that tears us apart from one another and the earth when this violence goes deep into our society, as it does into my own heart? And it's easy to miss that point, but when you've read her other writings, you know how personal that is for her. And I know I used to work at a rape crisis center, and I worked in a domestic violence shelter, and I worked in a homeless shelter, and I've been around families dealing with addiction, and I just know the statistics of how often this violence is not just something out there, but it's also what exists in our own lives and may have touched many of us to our own cores or those we love. And so when we do this work, we're not just doing it for the people out there. We also have to make time for us to do it for the people in here, in our own hearts. How do we walk this path of seeking justice with softened hearts, with opened hearts, when we are going to encounter people who disagree with us or try to push the status quo back upon us, and perhaps in respectful ways and sometimes not so respectful or civil ways? If we're going to continue to walk our path holding on to love, then we have to find ways to call that forth in one another when we're struggling, so that we're not just seeking justice, but we are being just. I imagine in my mind that we would have to place guards at the doors of our meetings. Guards who will protect us from our own agendas and bullet points and logistics to work our way through. And in my mind, I think like, oh, good, I want some Buddhist monks to show up where they're just like, and they're just a physical reminder to us saying, sit on the earth for a minute and breathe. I imagine them being hippies who are rolling up their pant legs and taking off their socks and shoes, and they're like, come and walk on the grass or dance on the planet with me. And that we're not just, okay, let's plow through this agenda now, and the next item is, but I imagine those are our guards. These people who inhabit that light, that the inner beauty is shining out and calling us to reconnect with that in ourselves and among each other as well. I don't know what they'll look like for you if you're one of the people who sets agendas for meetings, but invite them to be part of your group. Whoever calls you into that space, invite them in. Because their invitation is the same. Recover among us wholeness. We cannot be sustained by a vision of a better day alone. There's Rebecca Parker, man. She guides me and she haunts me in my work. She has another piece where she critiques theology of social justice that resonates with me that I want to share with you. She says, a theological critique of grounding our work in a dream of the better world is that we relate then to the present as deficient. And the dream becomes this commanding ideal that requires our hard work or obedience. It's exhausting. What we do is never enough. We always have to be creating this thing. It's exhausting. We can never work hard enough. It also primarily engages these capacities of will, determination, and decision-making. She writes, I do think there is an alternative, and it is to have our social justice work begin with attunement and attention to the realities of here and now, which include the blessings and beauty and goodness of what is right here, as well as the legacies of tragedies, the inheritances of injustices that are acting themselves out now and are carried in our bodies and in our communities. All those things which are responsive to what is right here, they call on our emotional capacities and our sensual capacities, our senses, our feelings, our bodies, our embodiment. In a different way than working on a dream of what could be does. It's almost like moving from our imagination down into our guts. That's work I want to do. I want to deeply appreciate the life that I'm just like running past right now. I want to appreciate that beauty when I hear Moira's voice, or I see someone just look at me with a smile. I want to slow down so that we can sustain this work with one another in a way that we aren't hardening our own hearts or anesthetizing ourselves to feeling about this world. This is critical. I really appreciate this morning that the women who stood up here were sharing about the Anti-Racist Collaborative of Des Moines, and now they have finally named their work. They've been working in this church for years, but now they have a name. I'm so grateful to hear you share about the work that you'd been doing, because it continues. Also have many folks involved in our restorative justice efforts and through Amos, working on mediation in the schools, all as ways to try to end the school-to-prison pipeline, ways that we're trying to change the disparate outcomes of the incarceration rates of African Americans in Iowa, which is one of the top 3 in the nation, which I'm sure many of you already know, because you're committed to this work. A few weeks ago, Mark initiated a conversation about hanging up a Black Lives Matter banner. Many of the other UU congregations, we've seen that those banners have been vandalized, their churches have been threatened, their stance on racism and white supremacy have been attacked. So we should know that if we do that, that's going to happen here too. We are we are resisting the damage that white supremacy doles out on people's lives here. And if we're going to stand up and remain standing against that tidal wave of violence, then we need to be a grove of firmly rooted people. So if we're going to stand together, then we have to do more than just meet about this banner and talk about what it might mean. we're going to have lots of different kinds of conversations. I'd want us to think about and plan for the critiques or the threats that would come. I'd want us to talk to our kids about what does that mean. I'd want us to talk to each other and learn more about why that isn't just a banner. If you don't already know about the Let's Talk mediation or second chance mediation that are going on through people in our church, in our schools, and with the Des Moines Police Department to help keep youth of color out of the prison system, then we need to talk about that. So that when people in your neighborhood or they see that you go to this church and they say, well, you guys have that sign up. What are you even doing? You could speak with confidence about what we are doing. And you could find ways to get involved. We would have to find ways to sustain courage in ourselves to hold on to love when we're faced with ignorance and violence. We need to commit to resist society's systemic racist violence. But we also need to resist being too busy to get involved. And we need to resist being too busy to listen to the beauty of life while we're doing all of this work. Rachel Naomi Remen is a doctor, and one of her patients articulated it like this. She said, most of us have been given many more blessings than we have ever received because we don't make the time to be blessed or make the space for it. We may have filled our lives so full of other things that we have no room to receive our blessings. One of my patients once told me that she has an image of all of us being circled by our blessings. Sometimes for years, like airplanes in a holding pattern at an airport, stacked up with no place to land. They're just waiting for a moment of our time and our attention. Spiritual practice is about creating a field of awareness where these blessings can land. It's important that we let them land, that we think, that we feel, that we do not anesthetize ourselves to life or the grief and pain that we face. And when we do this, receiving and softening our hearts, it's not just a spiritual act, it is a political act. So as one of your ministers, I'm now posting myself at the door, inviting you to think and feel for yourselves, to live from a place of wholeness and invite beauty in. So when you're making your agenda, I hope I haunt you and inspire you to think about where are we making space for each other to connect. Sally Buckholt said in a meeting the most wonderful thing. She said, yes, we're doing now in our social justice work, we begin with one-on-ones where we just meet someone you haven't met before and spend like 10 minutes talking about why you're here. And it's beautiful, and people are picking up this practice. And Sally said, we go to meetings with each other, but you don't get to know someone in a meeting. You get to know someone when you have a conversation with them. And so let's not just have meetings, let's have encounters. And so I'm one of those guards now posted at the door, encouraging us to make space for connection and wholeness. Don't you want that? Isn't that part of why you said you were here a minute ago? So then do it. And I'm preaching about this today because I am the biggest hypocrite. And I need the support of other people, and I need accountability. Because when it's just me, I talk myself out of it every single morning. So I'm going to share with you a couple of the ways I'm going to commit, and you can hold me accountable. And I'll hold myself accountable so that I can make space for this and really, truly be a minister posted at the door for the beauty of life. The first goal is that I will hold a retreat for activists on October 31st. I know it's Halloween, but it's a fifth Saturday. People don't generally have things planned on a fifth Saturday. So from 10 to 2, we're going to do the work that we never make time for. I don't make enough time for. Though I hope we're going to change that. We'll build relationships, we'll keep faith with beauty, and share with one another what calls us to this work. That's one of my goals. I hope that we do that quarterly. Second, the Soul Matters packet that many of us are a part of, they've added a new dimension to their spiritual exercises section this year. They've encouraged us to engage the Black Lives Matter movement, to read and to listen, to open our hearts, to be transformed by people who are engaged in this movement. That sounds a lot like creative interchange to me. That sounds a lot like a spiritual practice that is central to this congregation. So Tracy Beck, our Director of Religious Education, and I were talking about how we don't make time to do enough reading and to really make space to engage in this way. And so we said, well, forget that. That ends now. We're going to support each other we're holding another reading group, Linda. And this one will be during the day because we have a lot of evening meetings in our work here at the church, but it's going to be on the first and third Mondays at 2 p.m. Although if enough people say they would come during their lunch hour, I could change it to a Tuesday or a Thursday. But we're going to support each other in reading and connecting with other people's words to let in thinking and feeling about this life. So our first meeting will be September 21st, and we're going to read the first chapter of Dear White Christians. And finally, this summer, another commitment I want to make, but I really need your help to do this if you're interested. I attended a writing practice, a seminar this summer. It was 8 days long on writing as a spiritual practice, and it's a gift I want to share with myself and others, and if 7 people say they're interested, then we'll make it happen. Writing, okay, I see some hands. Great. So you got to email me. You can't just raise your hand. You got to actually come talk with me, and then we'll find a way to make this happen. There are many ways to share in spiritual practice in our congregation together this year. And I know our Soul Matters groups have officially closed the registration, but I talked to Tracy, and 2 hours a month. I don't know how, you're supposed to not be directive, but I don't know how to say it's 2 hours a month. Sit down with people in your community and talk about your life and what matters. You won't be sorry. So if that's something you're interested in, talk with Tracy and we'll open up some more groups. Whatever helps you slow down, recover yourself, your wholeness, and keep faith with beauty. Whatever helps you open to life, expect to love, and be prepared to serve. That's what I'm inviting you to identify now and to commit to. This isn't just about Erin being accountable. This is about us being a community of resistance. So what is it for you that you will do to make space for the beauty of life for yourself? I'll do it if you do it. Are you in?